It's Wednesday, September 4th. I'm Priyanka Arabindi.
And I'm Juanita Tolliver, and this is What a Day, the show where we're offering our sincerest congratulations and most heartfelt concern to hot dog eating champion Joey Chestnut, who set the world record on Tuesday of 83 hot dogs in just 10 minutes. What?
Feeling a little ill just thinking about it. Our prayers for your insides, Joey.
I often say gag me. I don't mean like this.
No.
I don't mean like this.
On today's show, New Jersey's uncommitted delegates are urging voters to not cast their ballots for the Harris-Walz ticket. Plus, a federal judge denied former President Donald Trump's request to delay sentencing in his hush money case.
But first, there is a growing gender divide among voters who support Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump, and a lot of the movement is happening among white voters. According to a recent ABC Washington Post Ipsos poll, Vice President Harris has a 13-point advantage among women voters, and Trump has a 5-point advantage among men. And that's an 18-point gap between the two groups.
Wow. Okay. Very stark here. You mentioned that most of the movement has been happening with white voters. So how have they been shifting?
Yeah, the biggest change since the Democratic convention has been among white women as Trump dropped from a plus 13 advantage among white women pre-convention to now only plus 2, which is within the margin of error for this poll. And then there are the white men who are flocking to Trump as his numbers jumped from plus 13 to plus 21 in the same time period.
Wow.
Now, when we consider these numbers, we have to keep in mind the reality that according to the U.S. Bureau of the Census current population reports, women have registered and voted at higher rates than men since 1980. So when it comes to voter power, it's important to watch how women move.
Listen, based on what you've told me, that sounds A-okay to me. But really, such a divide here. How much weight should we give this gender gap as we get closer and closer to November?
Like I always tell you with every poll, this is merely a snapshot of the current moment, but there are reasonable questions to ask about the gender gap in the context of which issues motivate these splits, like the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs that overturned the right to abortion access. Also, how the divide is impacted when you consider race, age, and more. To dig into all of this, I spoke with Zack, senior correspondent for Vox covering challenges to democracy and author of the book, The Reactionary Spirit, How America's Most Insidious Political Tradition Swept the World. Here's our conversation. So you wrote a piece back in March where you questioned the idea of a growing political divide between men and women. But given the recent polling that shows the gender gap growing between Harris and Trump voters, do you still think that divide's overstated, at least when we're talking specifically about American voters?
The honest answer to that question is I don't know. I don't know because pre-election polling, when it comes to demographic subgroups, is, it can often be very unreliable. Right now, men and women are a sort of different case because they're pretty large sample sizes. But also when you look at the attempts to try to figure out where this gender divide is coming from, you often end up looking at really small demographic subslices like Gen Z men and women, right? And there you're going to run into significant sample size problems. And there's going to be a lot of variation in each individual poll. And so you ended up getting these polls that with, you've seen them a lot in this cycle that showed Trump getting an improbably large percentage of black voters, for example, one that would defy anything close.
Cough, yes.
Right?
Yes, I see that all the time.
Right, it's just like that's some of those things are just not happening. And they're probably a result of there being statistical noise, right, in the sample. Randomness can generate random stuff. That's how it works. That's all like a big caveat, though. It's entirely possible that there is a growing gender divide in American politics. And when I wrote that article that you talked about a second ago, my conclusion wasn't this isn't happening. It's we don't have enough evidence to know for sure that it's happening. That there's some evidence, it's very preliminary, it's very new, and we don't know how durable these patterns are. We don't know how significant they are. And we know, based on past elections, that the gender gap is typically overstated. And generally speaking, dwarfed by gaps inside of genders. White women and black women vote much more differently than men and women do, right? Same thing with white men and black men. And, we could go on down the list, right? Race, religion, sexual orientation, age, all of these tend to be more important than gender historically. Again, that might change. And there's some reasons to think it may in fact be changing. But I'm still on the cautious side, right? Just because of how often this kind of thing gets overstated.
I appreciate the caution, but I do want to focus on the evidence around this election in which gender has become a major issue. Polls show Harris has increased her margin over Trump with women voters by about 13 points. But that divide was there when President Biden was the presumptive nominee. So we know reproductive rights has been a big issue driving women to Democrats in particular. But what else is pushing women voters to the left right now?
A few of the plausible guesses include, first, there's a growing educational gap among women and men. Women are increasingly more likely to enroll in and graduate from college than men are. And we know that education tends to make people, well, I should be cautious about that. We know that people who have college degrees are more likely to be Democrats. We don't really know why. That's another one of those fun puzzles, right, that we've got in American politics, where you look at these things and you have a bunch of different theories. You don't really know why it's true. But if it's the case that women are increasingly making up the ranks of college graduates, men are less likely to graduate, that means that women are probably more likely to become Democrats disproportionately. Another theory is that is generational. Like Dobbs is part of it, maybe a really big part. But another part would be that a lot of women who are younger now were socialized in a moment where gender politics and conflict over gender became really salient, right? A really important part of their experience, right? I'm talking Donald Trump running for president after the grab him by the pussy comments, the Me Too movement that came after that, the rise of a lot of young men paying attention to misogynist influencers, people like Andrew Tate. Like if you're a young woman in high school and the men are listening to a guy who is like, there's a lot of very good evidence that he's an actual sex trafficker. And that's who they're looking to for dating advice and advice about how to be a man in the modern world. It would make sense that a lot of women would sort of come to see politics through the lens of gender. And that's why a lot of the arguments about this, they tend to focus on younger women, right? Because the divide is not very evident in older generations. But there's some preliminary polling that you pointed to that tends to suggest a massive divide between young men and young women in political preferences. Again, we'll see if that's borne out in November, right? It may or may not be.
I do want to go to the flip side of that and hear your theories as it relates to men, because American men have been riding with Trump and Republicans.
Right. But the thing I want to add, there's like a little fun wrinkle, is that it's actually not that young men are more conservative than older generations. There is some evidence that like a fringe of young men listen to these Andrew Tate type figures, right? But actually, on average, a Gen Z man is more likely to be left-leaning than someone in older generations, maybe not millennials, but certainly older than that. What's really happened is that young women have swung really hard to the left, right? So a lot of the explanation is less what happened to men than what's going on with women and why, again, if this data is right, why are women so left-wing? That's one of the things that we have to puzzle through right now.
Well, let's start to dig into it because you mentioned a couple things already. You mentioned the recording where Trump talked about grabbing women by their genitals. We talked Me Too movement. There's Dobbs that we've already discussed at well. And a lot of that came up after Donald Trump's victory in 2016. So how do you see these kinds of events exacerbating gender divide in American politics?
I mean, there is a sense that the feminist movement and its gains are under attack in a way that they haven't been in a really long time. And it's not just like a sense, right? Dobbs wasn't just one political development among many. A lot of people treated it like that at the time, right? That it was just, this is, one of those things that'll happen and then people forget about it by November. And we know that's not what happened, right? We know it was one of probably the two most decisive issues, maybe the single most decisive issue in Democrats well overperforming in the midterm elections. Like this was an epical event for the way that a lot of Americans see their politics. And before that, abortion politics weren't actually that polarized on gender lines. Men and women were kind of similar when it came to abortion. But I have this theory, and I feel like it's been borne out by a lot of recent events, that people don't really appreciate something when it's going to happen. It's only when it actually happens that it changes the way they think about politics.
Oh, come on. I feel like Trump's full administration was a case study in that reality check. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like people just like they're like, okay, maybe this bad thing could happen, but that's good. That's a future problem, right? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But once the constitutional right to abortion was gone, and you started getting states banning abortion altogether pretty much, or doing 6-week bans that were functionally the same thing, people really changed the way they thought about this. And it wouldn't surprise me if a gender gap emerged as a consequence, a durable and consistent gender gap, because it's women whose rights are being taken away, right? Of course. Like historically, people would puzzle, why don't women care more about this? And I think the answer we may have is they didn't think that it was going to be under threat in the way that it is today. Again, one theory, but it strikes me as a plausible one.
That was my conversation with Zack Beauchamp, senior correspondent for Vox and author of the book, The Reactionary Spirit, How America's Most Insidious Political Tradition Swept the World, which is out now.
That is the latest for now. We'll get to some headlines in just a moment. But if you like our show, make sure to subscribe and share it with your friends. We'll be right back after some ads. Let's wrap up with some headlines.
Headlines.
A federal judge refused to come to former President Donald Trump's rescue on Tuesday, denying his request to delay his criminal sentencing in his New York hush money case. This comes months after Trump was found guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records. Trump and his lawyers have tried everything to get his conviction overturned by requesting that the case be moved from state to federal court. They argued that the judge who presided over the case, Justice Juan Merchan, was biased against the former president, and that the Supreme Court's ruling granting former presidents like Trump broad immunity from prosecution for official acts warrants a federal appeal. But Tuesday's rejection from a federal judge means that Trump's sentencing date is still on the books for September 18th. Mark your calendars.
On Tuesday morning, 2 Russian missiles struck the city of Poltava in central Ukraine in one of the deadliest attacks since the start of Russia's war on Ukraine. We reached back out to Katerina Hodunova, a journalist at the Kyiv Independent, for an update on the situation.
Russia hit the Poltava Military Communications Institute and a nearby hospital. The attack was carried out with 2 ballistic missiles, and it took place as people were going down to the shelter. As of the evening of September the 3rd, 18 people likely remain under the rubble, 51 people were killed and more than 200 are injured.
Following the attack, Ukrainian officials announced that they'll be carrying out an investigation into, quote, whether enough was done to protect the lives and health of the soldiers at the military facility. And in an interview with NBC News released Tuesday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that even though they don't need it, his country will continue holding the Russian territory it has captured since the start of last month's incursion into Russia's Kursk region. Zelensky also declined to say publicly whether he plans to go after more Russian land.
Sorry, I can't speak about it. It's like the beginning of this Kursk operation. With all respect, I can't speak about it. I think that the success is very close to surprise.
It is that time of year again, people. Time to get your COVID booster shot. The FDA approved a new COVID-19 vaccine from Novavax last week for people ages 12 and up. The agency also approved updated shots from Pfizer-BioNTech and Moderna for the fall and winter season, notably absent J&J. We just aren't going to talk about it. It's fine.
Nope.
All 3 are designed to target newer COVID variants amid a surge in infections over the summer, and they are available right now at your local pharmacies. So be like us, make a beeline over there and get that shot. But unlike years past, the federal government will not cover this new round of shots for folks who don't have insurance. Uninsured or underinsured people may have to pay up to $200 to get their booster. But the CDC said that it will dedicate $62 million to vaccinating low-income folks nationwide for free. Guys, you've seen the numbers. You know the deal. Get the shot.
A former staffer for New York Governors Kathy Hochul and Andrew Cuomo was arrested Tuesday on charges of acting as an unregistered agent of the Chinese government. According to the indictment, Linda Sun worked on China's behalf to build relationships between New York politicians and Chinese officials and sabotage the attempts of the Taiwanese government to work with Hochul and Cuomo. Sun received lavish gifts and cash in exchange for that work, which she used to purchase a $3.6 million home and multiple cars, including a 2024 Ferrari. Yes,
Subtle.
a current year Ferrari.
Perfect. Just really flying under the radar there.
Her charges include violating and conspiring to violate the Foreign Agents Registrations Act, as well as visa fraud and money laundering. Sun worked in the New York government for over a decade across multiple agencies. Her husband, Chris Hu, a liquor store owner, has also been indicted.
Uncommitted Democratic delegates from New Jersey announced that they'll withhold their votes from Vice President Kamala Harris and Democratic congressional candidates in November, barring a U.S. arms embargo on Israel and the negotiation of a permanent ceasefire. The announcement comes 2 weeks after uncommitted delegates staged a sit-in at the DNC in response to being denied a platform to have a Palestinian American speak at the event. Tensions within the party over the Israel-Hamas war continue to be a sticking point for many voters, especially young people. In a recent CBS poll, 77% of Americans under the age of 30 said that they want an end to U.S. weapons aid to Israel. And as college students return to campus, protests are already underway. In a statement released online, the New Jersey uncommitted delegates said, quote, "We refuse to be complicit in genocide. We refuse to vote for a party that callously ignores our demands and the will of the American people."
Hearing this story, one of the things I'm going to be watching for is how many other states where there were uncommitted delegates will be making the same statement. Because one thing the uncommitted movement has been clear about is, one, they're not here to support Donald Trump, don't want a Trump win, but they do want an end, and they're willing to leverage their votes in a push for that and protest for that. And so I'm curious to see if Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, other states with uncommitted movement delegates and members come forward. So something to keep an eye on, y'all.
Definitely. And those are the headlines.
One more thing before we go. The first ever presidential debate between former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris is set for September 10th, assuming someone doesn't chicken out. Will we see a heated exchange of policy ideas, or will it be a masterclass in dodging questions and awkward pauses? Honestly, your guess is as good as ours. One thing's for sure, it's going to be a spectacle you don't want to miss. Watch along with our friends of the pod community to react, comment, and meme in real time in our subscriber-only Discord chat. Subscribe now to join cricket.com/friends.
That is all for today. If you like the show, make sure you subscribe, leave a review, register a woman to vote, and tell your friends to listen.
And if you're into reading and not just about the medical impact of ingesting 83 hot dogs like me, What A Day is also a nightly newsletter. Check it out and subscribe at cricket.com/subscribe. I'm Juanita Tolliver.
I'm Priyanka Arabindi. And don't be a cliche with your corruption money. Come on, a Ferrari? So uninspired.
Tacky.
It's almost like those TikToks where it's like, if I won the lottery, like there would be signs and they would all be in my closet. That's kind of how you would know.
Yeah,
if I
I'm into that.
Got my corruption money.
That. Your quiet corruption wealth.
Yeah. It would be hanging in my closet. What a Day is a production of Crooked Media. It's recorded and mixed by Bill Lance. Our associate producer is Raven Yamamoto. Our producer is Michelle Alloy. We had production help today from Ethan Oberman, Tyler Hill, Greg Walters, and Julia Clare. Our showrunner is Erica Morrison, and our executive producer is Adrian Hill. Our theme music is by Colin Gilliard and Kashaka.
Now, two pigeons bemoaning the fact you can stream DirecTV satellite-free.
These humans can stream all the top-rated national news channels on DirecTV, and now with no satellite dish.
This just in. Weather, sports, election coverage. DirecTV has it all, but something is missing. The satellite dish.
What are you doing?
I'm reporting the news. Back to you, Bob.
Here's some news. You're a buffoon.
Stream the top-rated national news channels. No satellite dish. Visit DirecTV.com. Internet required. Top-rated news based on 2023 Nielsen ratings.